we're going to take this large pile of greens from this to this in just a matter of hours. Stay tuned. Okay, we're gonna get started. What I've got here is a salad spinner full of spinach that has been cut and has been soaking to clean it. These are commercially purchased, so I got these at the store. We're not growing spinach right now in our garden, so I want to make sure that I get all of the sand and any creatures that might still be in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dump the water. I'm going to run it through the salad spinner and get it all dry so it takes care of it. But what you can do is with that, I'm also going to be using some of this. This is the bulk spinach. This is packaged spinach. It still needs to be cleaned. No matter if it says it's pre-cleaned or not, it says it's washed and ready to use. I am still going to wash it one more time just to be sure, because you may remember all of those recalls of spinach and greens and romaine lettuce that were in packages ready to go, but they still had issues with salmonella. Was it salmonella or it was E. coli? We're going to make sure this stuff is clean. So let me get these clean and then we'll be ready to start prepping these for dehydrating. Okay, when I'm doing spinach, I will just dry the entire thing, leaf, stem, and all, because these stems are not particularly woody or thick, and there's probably more, if not more, nutrition in the stem as there is in the leaves. So I want to make sure that I get everything. And the thing with spinach is it will shrink tremendously. So I am not so particular about making sure that this doesn't stack on top of each other, because as it dries it shrinks a lot. So if I were doing other kind of fruits and vegetables, especially something like fruit, I would never stack it because it doesn't shrink up enough, and you have surfaces that don't get complete air circulation through them and can make drying a little more difficult, and if not a little unsafe, because you might have sections that don't actually get dry, which can cause mold later if you don't make sure you properly condition and that you're storing properly. So I'm going to load these trays up. What happens with my dehydrator is that these are a little thicker than the Excalibur Space Gift. So I'll do one every other tray. I'll take out the extra and I'll dry these. It'll take about 6 hours. Then I'll put another set in and we'll be going. Now you can certainly wilt this spinach if you'd like. Blanching is not necessary when you're dehydrating greens. It's necessary for cooking because it allows the oxalic acid to be released, which helps you absorb the nutrient of the spinach much better than if you eat it raw. But however, we eat raw spinach for salads as well. So I'm going to get these 2 trays going. I'm going to go ahead and wash up my bag spinach and get another couple trays, and we're going to get started. See, I've also got kale on here soaking, making sure that we get it nice and clean. All right, there is nothing like recording a whole segment for a video that you forgot to hit the record button. So we're kind of going into midstream with this, and I'm going to kind of recreate what I did, so that way you see that my trays aren't clean because I had to unload them. So here we go. What I had was a sink full of kale. I would take the stem out, I would strip the leaves off of the stem and set them in my salad spinner. The stems went aside, because you can use these stems to either put in your stock pile for making chicken stock or vegetable stock or whatever you'd like, or you can go ahead and dehydrate these to add to your powder as well. But I do them separately from the leaves because they take longer to dry. The smaller you get them, the better and faster it's going to dry. So just like with my spinach greens, I'm going to put these back in the bowl. I'm going to run these through real quickly. Stop it, because these have gone through twice now. There's not going to be much more moisture coming off of them. So I'll show you. They dry really well. And the less moisture on your leaves, the less time it takes to dry. And what you can see, I think, You can see here is the water that comes out of them. It's tinted green because of the chlorophyll and some of the nutrients that come out from just washing. You can save this liquid if you'd like by putting it in ice cube trays, freezing it, and using it for stock later. So if you're going to cook some rice up, you can throw a couple of these ice cubes into your rice water and your rice will absorb the nutrients. You can put it in stock for chicken stock or kale, or vegetable stock that you're creating your stock from. Throw a couple of the ice cubes in there and you've got more nutrients and flavor coming into it that way. So don't throw this away if you have the ability to store it. I'm going to go ahead and start loading my leaves. Now what's going to make this cool is that these, if I were to try to slide them in on top of another tray in an Excalibur, these would just get pushed to the back. What we're going to do is go ahead and just stack this and smush those leaves, and it's going to be okay. Do our next layer. All right, Nesco on top of the Excalibur. You can't see the top of it because it goes up so high. I try to make sure that I have moved over as much as I can to let some of the heat come out of the Excalibur to work better. So what I'm going to do is that typically you will dry greens at 125. I like to also dry them at 95 because it helps keep more of the nutrients in the greens. But today, because I have a lot going through, I'm going to go ahead and keep them at the 125 temperature and get them started. All right, here we go. And just let me warn you, when you take off your door of your Excalibur, make sure that the machine has come to a complete stop because this stuff will blow. Even in the best of circumstances, it's going to blow some. In fact, the bottom tray probably has some at the back. No, we actually did good this time. I don't see there's a little bit on, if you can see the back there, the cage, a little bit gets blown around. So these have been for, let's see, officially 5.5 hours, and they are well dry. You don't ever test anything until it's had a chance to cool down first because heat can still keep things moist and pliable. But spinach dries in about 3 to 4 hours for me in my Excalibur. So these are all dry. They're ready to pull out to store. All right, here are the stems. These are still, after about 5.5 hours, very wet, very soft. They are not ready yet. The kale is still, while it's becoming dry, it's not all quite, well, that fell through. It is mostly dry, but in some of the denser spots, still soft. So I know that's not done. In the Nesco, it takes a little bit longer to dry than it does the Excalibur. It just does. So you can see that the spinach is also not dry at the bottom of the machine. So we're going to let this go for another couple hours. All right, so this is my last tray. And what I have here is a container, airtight container full of spinach chips. So this is something that you can add to any meal by taking a handful of it and just dropping it into your meal, and you have spinach bulk as opposed to just having spinach powder, which kind of blends in. This would be like putting into your spinach, into your spaghetti sauce, or into any kind of Alfredo sauce, or anything that you wanted to have actual spinach leaves in. Put these in. They will rehydrate while they're heating up in the sauce, and you will have it like you had spinach. This will save you a ton of room in your freezer. So what we're doing is taking all of our leaves, placing them inside of our container, and then what we're going to do is allow this to condition the same way we would do fruits and vegetables. I will give this about 3 days, 4 days at the most, because these are fully dried, and I've touched them all, so I know. And if it gets too full, you can always pack a little bit. If they get a little broken, it's no big deal. Then you place your lid on, make sure it's fully sealed. And over the course of the next week, as you do this, shake it up, make sure that they've had room to move all around, and check it every so often to see if you see any condensation. If you see condensation, or if you see any of the leaves start to change color or texture because you're seeing that they're absorbing some moisture, you throw them all back in the machine and you go again. All right, so here is our kale, all done, all completely crunchy, ready to... Okay, now we're gonna get started on the process of powdering. We're going to be using... I'm going to be using my large blender. I happen to have a Vitamix that I saved up
many years for, just to get the basic one, but I'm going to use it because I have it. I also use a Ninja blender. Any bullet blender will work, and I find they work better even than coffee grinders. But today, because I'm processing so much, having a larger blender will just make this go faster. You can use whatever blender you have. You do not have to have a Vitamix. I just happen to have one. So let's get started. I'm about to make a very big mess with all of my trays. The one thing about the Nesco is that it doesn't make it really easy to dump all of your stuff. So this is how I do it. You might have a better way. And if you've got a better way, I'd love to hear it in the comments below to give everybody else an idea about how they can empty their trays. Things get stuck in here a lot too. I could have used fruit leather sheets and that might have made it a little bit easier, but I find that it inhibits airflow more, and I just choose not to use them if I absolutely don't have to. So let's get all these emptied. Then we'll work on the spinach from the Excalibur, and we'll be on our way. I'll take my jar lid off. This is a bit messy, and I am a messy cook slash processor. So if you are really good at this, then cool. I'm impressed. So we're going to take this just as a cone, dump the rest into here. So what we have is kale spinach powder. Now I'm going to go ahead and empty this into a tray, because the next thing you would want to do is go ahead and dry this for about an hour after, because moisture from the air gets in here and you've created more air in the pockets, and heat can cause moisture, can cause everything to heat up. So for some people, doing this a second time with the dehydrator after you've powdered it is a good option of getting the rest of the moisture that could be remaining out of your powder. So what I have are these lipped silicone trays from Bright Kitchen that are great for fruit leather, and they work really well for powders too. They're new to me. I've only been using them for a little while, and I absolutely adore this thing. It makes drying so much easier for things that are liquid. It makes powders easier because you have a lip that they don't get, that things don't just blow off so easily. And as long as you turn your machine on once your door is closed or your whole stack is put together, and don't open it again until the fan on your machine has come to a full stop, you shouldn't have powder blowing everywhere, but this lip helps do it. But don't worry, if you don't have this, you can make your own. I'll link to an iCard above to show you how to make your own lipped trays from either these silicone sheets like I use here, or from parchment paper. It's super easy. That's all you really need. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to take this powder and just spread it onto the trays. You can see how me tapping is bringing more out from the bottom, because the heat from running this process will make things get a little steamy, introduces a little bit of moisture, so things tend to clump a little bit. So we're going to do this. And I'm going to take my handy dandy art brush and come in here and clean out. Now, touching this is still warm from running through the Vitamix. So that's why you go ahead and run it through the processor, through the dehydrator one more time, just to make sure that there's no moisture, because it feels warm and a little moist. And you don't want to put this into a jar with either filling up your jar from your last batch that hasn't been too old, or even putting it in its own jar. You don't want that moisture because you don't want to ruin this. So let's put this back in the dehydrator for about an hour at 95 degrees. Okay, what we have here is approximately 8 cups of loosely packed dried spinach. This comes in a 10-ounce bag from my local grocery store, which is about 9.5 cups of fresh spinach leaves. The equation's not quite the same because the press of the fresh leaves there's no press in this, and there's a lot of air gaps and airspace in here, but it's approximately 8 cups of loosely packed spinach leaves, dehydrated. Now we're going to see how much this one bag will equal to as far as the end product. All right, so let's see about how much this equals for powder. Now, this is much finer than kale powder is. I find that spinach powder is super, super fine. So it gets everywhere as you dry it, and you can save it all by using a brush. You can't save it all, but you can get much of it before you waste, so that you're not wasting any of these bits. But yeah, I spend a little time making sure I get as much as I can because every little bit helps. All right, first what I usually do is I just brush down the sides because it's easier, and most of this will come out with the bulk at the bottom. Now, something I want you to look at, because I get it in the dehydrating group on Facebook all the time, that people will say, I dehydrated all of this spinach and this is all that I got out of it, or any other product that you might want to talk about that you're thinking about. The thing is that it's not that it's so small, it's that it's concentrated. So you've taken out all of the water, you've taken out all of the bulk, and you use an equivalency of a small amount of powder to equal the same thing that it would have been fresh as far as nutrients and taste. And I will put the infographic right here, however that works, to show you how this correlates for 1 cup of spinach to a cup, how much powder it is. So looking at my measuring, this is approximately, because I've got a bigger one, I can use a smaller one, I think. This is approximately a 1/4 cup. Say that's maybe, I think these are little half pints from Anchor Hawking, and I'm using a lid with a silicone ring that looks like I should have cleaned it better, but it's not going to stay in here permanently. I'm just doing this to show you. So that's how much that you would get from it right there. I hope that gives you an idea about how much a whole bag of spinach is to this. All right, so here we go. This is our spinach and kale powder. You can separate these if you'd like. I just go ahead and combine them all because I use them together in doing to add to any cooking that I'm doing. It goes in everything I make, from eggs to brownies. And yeah, you heard that right. I put this in brownies. I'll link up in the iCards to a post that's about green powder and how I use it. I'll also link you up here about storage. You just need to store this in airtight containment. So a mason jar with a tight fitting lid, an old spaghetti jar with a tight fitting lid that's airtight. Anything that you have that's airtight, this is perfect. So thanks for watching, and I will see you again next time.